Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight on Living Mythology, I'm proud to bring you Brian's Drive-In Theater with Brian Walker. Greetings, Brian. How are you?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm looking forward to tonight's show. It's my understanding that you've seen lots and lots of horror movies since we last spoke.
I have. I have been on a quest this fall to instead of well, and I have been watching some old movies, but I've been trying to watch some newer stuff. I've been going to the theater more. I didn't make it to the drive-in this season, which really stinks because I wanted to. Yeah, just the timing just never worked out. And I can't stay up late. So if I go to the drive-in, it has to be early in the season or really late in the season. I can't I can't stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning waiting for a double feature to wrap up, and uh, we've thought about going to a drive-in. We've been up north on vacation, but golly, in northern Michigan, it's daylight at 10 o'clock. So what do you do? I just can't stay up that late. So um, the area drive-ins here are kind of wrapping things up for the fall, and I kind of missed the window. I think there's one possibility that I might get to explore this weekend, maybe Saturday night. I might get to go to the Brownsville drive-in, but that's kind of a it's going to be a stretch, but I'm going to give it a shot.
Good. I hope that you make it there and that it's worth the attempt.
Me too. Yeah, before we start talking about movies and what I've been seeing, I just wanted to briefly address a couple of deaths that movie fans have suffered. Roger Brown, as you know, passed away just a few days ago at the age of 94. One of the very few sword and sandal actors for whom I never did a page, and I don't know what I'm at a loss as to tell you why I never created a page for him. I just never did. But he was, quite a spectacle in sword and sandal movies. He was in Italy for I think for about 20 years as a working actor. He was also a physical therapist, which I found kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
I did not know that until he passed away. I had no idea. Um, I guess it explains, how I mean he was, in great shape, and I guess it explains how he knew, so much about the body and such. And it makes sense now that I think about it, but I just had no idea. And Mitzi Gaynor passed away today. She was 93 years old. Roger Brown was 94. But Mitzi Gaynor was, a musical star, and kind of one of the last vestiges of old Hollywood, like from the 1950s. Those people, sadly, largely passed on, and we unfortunately lost another one. And there just aren't too many people left from that era anymore, which is sad.
It is sad, and once they're gone, and it's up to people like us to keep their memory alive.
And it's also up to people like us to, tell people about their work and the work of theirs that we liked a lot. Um, and somebody like Mitzi Gaynor, a lot of her stuff was, show and spectacle, and not a ton of it is recorded, unfortunately. I mean, there's a lot of television specials that are recorded, but she didn't make lots of films or anything like that. So for people like that, I think it's doubly sad because it makes it harder to go back and revisit their talent and revisit performances and what they did best. Um, but just sad to see both of those. I mean, both lived fantastically long lives. I mean, 94 and 93. Wow. I mean, that's amazing.
Those are good lives, yes.
Good long lives. On the other hand, yikes. I My mother-in-law passed away when she was 94, and oh boy, that last year was pretty grisly. It was rough.
And my
That's probably
father just passed away too, and he was 93. And yes, the last year was kind of rough.
rough. And you know what? It's not that I'm afraid of death, but I'm afraid of that. I
I
mean, that
totally understand that.
yes, I'm afraid of being incapacitated and not being able to do anything about it. That I think has got to be the most depressing, terrifying thing that you can ever go through.
and just losing your capacities and your abilities so slowly and just waiting to go.
And that's got to be agonizing. And speaking of agonizing, the first film I wanted to talk about was one that I saw a couple of weeks ago in the theater called The Substance. Have you heard of it?
No, I have not, but I'm looking forward to hearing about it now.
The buzz about it's been pretty big, quite honestly. And to tell you the truth, I didn't have a whole lot of preconceived notions going into it. I just knew that my friend wanted to see it a lot, and I knew a couple of the cast members. It's Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. And Margaret Qualley is Andy McDowell's daughter. Um, and the two of them, Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, are in a way. Oh golly, can I? I don't want to toss out too many spoilers, but in a way, they're the same person.
Okay.
But it's all about. Well, I forgot. Dennis Quaid is in it as well, and I gotta say, Margaret Qualley is very good in her role, but Dennis Quaid and Demi Moore were just amazing. Dennis Quaid plays this really sleazy, disgusting producer, and he is fantastic. I've got to tell you. But I think the best performance is Demi Moore. What she goes through and what she has to do in that movie, and she most of the time is carrying the whole picture on her back, and she's amazing in it. I've been seeing her. I've been watching her performances for more than 40 years. I used to watch General Hospital when I was a teenager, and one of her early roles. I think she was probably just a teenager at the time. She had a big role on General Hospital, and then she used that to springboard into the Brat Pack movies, and then beyond that. I haven't heard anything from her for a long time. I haven't really seen any of her performances, and I'm not a detractor or anything, but other than General Hospital and St. Elmo's Fire, and Ghost was pretty good too. I never saw many of her later performances, but she is fantastic in this. She's
She played a
really, really good.
stripper in one movie, I remember. That's, I think,
Oh yeah, was that called Striptease? I think.
Striptease, I believe, and that's the last thing I saw her in that's recent. And I heard that she had hooked up with uh, Kirsten,
Oh,
uh,
Ashton Kutcher.
yes, Aston Kutcher, and
They were
that
married for a while.
they
Mhm.
later broke up. So that's the extent of my knowledge about Demi Moore. That's
Well, well,
recent.
I, well, I'll tell you what. None of that takes away any from her talent because I think she is fantastic in this movie.
Mhm.
I was blown away by her performance, and I really identified with her too because with her character, she looks fantastic in this, by the way. But her character is aging, and she is an actress turned fitness personality. Uh, and she'd had a lot of success, but she's over 50 now. And actually, Demi Moore is over 60, but she's
Wow.
over 50, and Dennis Quaid wants to replace her with someone younger because she's over 50. And I've got to tell you, the camera is this far away from her face, and she does not look even 50. I'm sorry. I think she looks fantastic. Um, and she doesn't look she doesn't have the like giant duck lips, or and her face hasn't been pulled taut so badly that she can't close her eyes anymore or anything. I've read that she's had plastic surgery, but it must have been really good work because she looks like she did, I don't know, like 20 years ago. I think it's amazing. And you get to there, she is naked in I don't know how many different scenes in the movie. Now she has to be, and I can't really explain why. I mean, it's not gratuitous. Well, for the most part, I don't think it's gratuitous. I think maybe some of it, a little bit of it might be. But I was just amazed. I mean, she has turned back the clock. She looks fantastic, and her performance in this is just amazing. She's incredible in it. She's a really, really talented woman, and carries the whole film on her back. And at the end, I mean, as you get into it, and her character degrades, I suppose, more and more. I mean, it's a fantastic performance. I was blown away by it. And you know, as soon as you can see it, watch it. If you have, and you know, you and I have talked about aging a lot, and
Yes.
the the whole crux of this is a body horror film too. I don't know if those make you squeamish or not, but are you?
No,
Do you know what I mean when I say body horror?
no, but I imagine it's very physical and very bloody or something like that.
Yes, I mean, and very a lot of the horror, you know, revolves around somebody being cut open or being stitched up, or you know, something of that nature. You know, kind of an infliction on the body.
I'm
Uh,
not squeamish about those films. I tend not to prefer them, so I usually avoid those type of films.
it,
I'm not
it's
squeamish about
excruciating. It really is. But I have to tell you, if you can watch it, and if you ever have, you know, thought, well, gee, you know, I hate being this old. I wish I were, you know, 30 years younger. Like Oscar Wilde said, be careful of what you wish for, because you may actually get it, and that this is what happens to Demi Moore, and I think that that's sort of the message of the film.
Is it
Um,
Tubi or is it
oh
available?
no, it's in the theaters.
It's in the theaters. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's a very recent film then.
Oh, it's out now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. And I, like I said, I loved it. I and was just blown away by it. Now, that's not to say that I didn't have big problems with the movie. There are holes in the plot that you could drive a bus through. And that was kind of that was one of my issues with it. I think it was edited pretty tightly, but I think that they could have inserted maybe more lines of exposition so that I wouldn't be so confused as to what was going on here and there. But overall, I thought it was really, really good. Now, Margaret Qualley is very good in her role as well. Um, but I have to tell you, Demi Moore, and to a lesser extent, Dennis Quaid, just stole the show. Dennis Quaid isn't, he's only in it here and there. You know, he's not in it throughout the movie. He's not in like practically every scene like Demi Moore is, or many scenes, I should say.
The Quaids are very good character actors. You know, they
And they do crazy really well,
yes.
and sleazy. They both do sleazy really well. And this is sort of a crazy, sleazy character. Um, but it just fantastic at it. I was like I said, her performance, Demi Moore's performance in this just blew me. Wasn't expecting her to be that good. I wasn't expecting the movie to be that interesting. It just, you know, really knocked my socks off. Like it's not a perfect movie though. I mean, I had some big problems with things that happened in the plot that just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I find that with a lot of contemporary horror films, they don't even bother giving you a premise. They you know, they don't bother with the plot holes. Who cares? Yeah, they did, and they could be done a little better, I think.
Hmm.
But the substance, big thumbs up. I really liked it. Um, the next film I wanted to see but didn't, unfortunately, is Terrifier 3.
I
Um,
saw Terrifier 1 yesterday, actually.
really? Okay. Well, I wanted to see Terrifier 3, so I had to go back and watch Terrifier 1 and 2, for that matter. And I've got to say, Art the Clown is suitably scary. And the guy who portrays Art, the actor who portrays Art the Clown, I think is immensely talented. He's really good at being creepy and murderous. The movies themselves, a lot of the horror is just gratuitous slasher, but that's what you sign up for when you watch one of the Terrifier movies. I mean, and some of it is excruciating. I mean, you know, some of the and I like slasher films, but some of it is really whoa. You know, it's pretty rough.
But we found that it was like some parts of it defied the expectations you have about movies like that, and they did something a little different. Some scenes, but the end was very predictable. It's like, okay, he's going to be an immortal force of some sort,
Hmm.
and he's going to come back to life, and so on and so forth. That's exactly what happened. So even though while the movie was ongoing, there were some surprises, and he did some things that we didn't expect to do, like they killed off the hero of the movie like halfway through the movie, and that was unexpected. They did a few other unexpected things, but the ending of it was right out of the playbook for movies like this.
True. Yeah, I'll give you that. I will say this, having watched both uh, Terrifier and Terrifier 2, I thought the second one was actually the better film by far. That's not to say that it's not similar, but it's a better movie, and I think for maybe a couple of reasons. The original one was made for $35,000.
Wow,
Yeah, isn't that
impressive.
amazing?
It's
When
amazing.
I knew it was a cheap, low budget movie, but I had no idea. I mean, I thought it was at least, I don't know, a million, which is nothing these days, you know. But I thought it was at least that. No, 35 grand. And I think that's just stunning. Wow. And it looks, well, it looks like a cheap horror movie, but it's way more well done than $35,000. So if
Right.
you look at the budget, actually, I think it's almost a masterpiece because it looks good, you know. And
Yes.
I we had it on the big screen downstairs, and I thought it looked really good. I did think that the second one was better, but it did not have a big budget, but it had a much larger budget. The budget on the second one from 2022 was about 300K, about 300,000. The new one, I mean, wow, they got up to a $2 million budget
Oh,
with
wow.
the new one, and the new one has some of the same cast members as the second one. The only person who's carried through is David Howard Thornton, and he's the person who plays Art the Clown. uh, Extremely well, you know, might I add.
Did they get into his backstory yet?
I haven't seen the third one,
Oh,
so I no, not really. You don't really get much of an insight into that, or at least I didn't after watching the first two. Now I will admit that I think I did kind of fall asleep during the first one, not because it was boring, because it wasn't, but I was just that tired. Um,
the only complaint we had about the first one, really, and it looked like a low budget production, but it was well thought out, and again they did have some genuine surprises. Was that they didn't take the clown out whenever they had the chance to, several times during the movie. They stabbed him a little and knocked him down when you knew he was going to get back up again and do the same thing, even worse. But they had opportunities several times in the movie to really like mess him up really good where he's not likely to stand up and wander back into wherever they are and do horrible things to them.
yeah, I'm kind of eager to see the third one,
Uh-huh.
and um, I'm not sure. There's a theater it's one of the mall theater things where they have, I don't know, like 12, 15 screens. It's really close to our house, though. It's only maybe like a 5, 6 minute drive. It's really close by. And we've been going to it because of two reasons. For one thing, it's really close by. And the other reason, it has the reclining and heated seats.
Uh-huh.
Our other megaplex, which is a Regal, has neither. Their seats suck, and um, they're not heated, and they don't have a power recline feature. So I mean that kind of makes the movie better for me, because the last time I went to Regal to see a movie in those uncomfortable seats, I was squirming the whole time. The seats at this AMC here that's local are better, and it does make for a better experience. The only issue I have with the AMC theater is that it's filthy, and I mean from where you walk in through the glass doors all the way back to the theaters, there is popcorn and garbage strewn everywhere. And every time I walk in there, it's like that. I don't think anybody ever vacuums it. And I don't know, where does all this popcorn come from? You know, it's like $20 a bucket, right? I mean, why would you scatter it it's like gold, you know, treated
Special effects immersion into the movie.
it. Or maybe people are so frightened by the movies that they're throwing it off. But like I said, it's a mess. I wish they'd clean it up, because you walk in and you get the stench of the movie popcorn anyway, which I don't like. I mean, I like popcorn, but whatever they are cooking their popcorn in, no thanks. Um, and I never get anything at the theater anyway, because usually we go out to dinner before the movie, so I'm not hungry by the time I get there. You know.
Yeah, we do the same pretty much.
Yeah, I also don't want to buy a $12 box of Mike and Ike's. But unfortunately, people get upset about the cost of concessions, but that's really the only way the theaters make money.
Make
They don't.
money.
They make very little, if not, if anything, on the actual film being there. I mean, the studios and everybody else gets that, so they have to sell $20 buckets of popcorn.
Any other new movies that you've seen recently?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no. I had intended to go see a couple of other horror films in addition to Terrifier 3 that are out, but it's just been a really busy time. Now we have been watching a lot of older horror films, and I have seen some ones that are new to me, but not necessarily, they're not in theaters, not necessarily new. One that we watched just last night, which we've had a copy of for years, and honest to God, I don't ever remember watching it, but I really liked it. It's called Hellbent.
I've heard of that. I might have seen it actually.
Okay, you might have. It's about 20 years old. It came out in 2004. It stars Dylan Fergus and Brian Kirkwood. It's a Paul Etheridge film, and it's about two people, two gay men who kind of meet each other and are attracted to each other. And in the middle of this, there is a more or less a serial killer who is wiping out gay men all over West Hollywood, including their friend. Ooh, that's a spoiler, isn't it? Including some people they might know. So I mean, the body count in it's pretty high, and the slasher content is pretty spectacular. The movie gets a lot of buzz because of the gay element that runs through it. However, you could swap that out for it's incidentally gay. Does that make any sense? It's not necessarily the main motivator of the actual
I can
plot.
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it makes for a really good film, and I loved it. I thought it was a really good movie, and there again, another not so expensive movie. But there is sort of a gay subgenre of horror films, and that's one from about 20 years ago, and I thought it was done pretty well. I really liked it. I'd give it. I think IMDb gave it a 5.5 rating, and I think that's way too low for that movie. I would probably give it like a 6.5 to a 7. It's not perfect.
We have to come up with a rating system that's peculiar to you and use that henceforth.
I think I'm kind of easy when if I'm entertained by a movie, if I can sit down and watch it for 2 hours or however long it is and be entertained by it, not be bored by it, you already are at a 6 with me. So if you hold my attention, yeah, you're probably going to be that high.
I'm the
Uh,
same. I actually made a movie. It was a 65-minute long movie. So I know
mm,
how much work goes into making a movie, even a cheap one. So anybody who's made a movie that's like an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is, it's more than I've accomplished. So I tend to cut them lots of slack. I might not enjoy every single movie I watch, but I appreciate the fact that somebody or many somebody's coordinated their efforts and put effort into it and produced it and set it out there. So I tend to be easy on my ratings also.
well, like I said, for me, if I found it entertaining, great. Now you can see gaffes in the production. You don't see those as much as you used to. In some of the old 50s and 60s B movies, you could see boom mics, sometimes behind the scenes, like production assistants running around. You could. I mean,
I've
from time
seen those, yes.
you saw it on TV too, especially if it was live or
Dark
something.
Shadows was
Oh,
notorious.
oh boy, all the soap operas were. Dark Shadows, unlike most soap operas, is well preserved.
Yes.
You can get beautiful copies of every episode. You cannot do that for any other soap opera from that vintage, from that era. You just can't. A lot of them are gone. Uh, the ones that were shot on videotape would get erased,
Erased, yes.
and which is a shame too. So I think Dark Shadows gets beaten up for that because there are such good copies of each episode, and you can see it. But all TV production used to be that way. Well, not all of it, but the fast live stuff was often that way.
It
And
happened
you know,
on my show. When I had my show, I remember one of the people I had as a camera person, they erased all my trauma footage. I was at Trauma, and the Trauma folks were giving me a crash course in how to do special effects for inexpensive horror movies.
hmm,
So we filmed that. It took days, and we filled up a tape, and somebody took that tape and taped over it.
oh,
And so it was lost forever, and we hadn't used it in the show yet. And I asked them, what possessed you to do that? Well, I needed a tape. It's like I would have given you blank tapes, if you had asked for them.
yeah. Mhm. Hope he got fired or she, whoever it was.
It was a labor of love for everybody, so there's no firing, but I didn't trust them with any uh I collected all footage after it was shot rather than leaving with people after that.
Yeah, good point. Anyway, I thought Hellbent is really worth a watch. Very hard to find, however. Um, as we were watching it last night, we were looking up some information on it, and I was shocked to see that if you want to get it from Amazon Prime, it's $20
Wow.
for a
To
20-year-old movie.
That's
I don't,
amazing.
I don't know if they jacked up the prices for Halloween or what, but for a 20-year-old movie, $20, I think that's a lot. And trying to get copies on DVD are more expensive than getting it on Prime. So we lucked out. We have at least one DVD that might be worth $30.
Maybe. Have you been
But like I
watching,
said, very good movie.
have you been watching some of the new horror TV shows like the one that comes to mind is Wednesday, which is an
Uh,
Addams Family.
excuse me. I have not, but that's sort of on my agenda. I would like to see a couple of those.
Yeah,
And Wednesday is one of them, actually. Yep.
we've enjoyed Wednesday a great deal. We enjoyed Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the new iteration of that was recorded. That was very good too.
Hmm.
Uh, Not perfect. There are some things we would have liked to be different or better, but still very enjoyable. And we watched them. Right now, we're watching Agatha All Along, which is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's one
Hmm.
of Disney Plus shows, and we're enjoying that.
Yeah, I to tell you the truth, I watch very little television. But I've been trying to make time to stay up with things actually, and see some new stuff as I've been doing for the last couple of months, and I've been trying to go back and watch some of the old stuff too. Just never seems to be enough hours in the day.
No, there doesn't seem to be.
But I will sometimes what I'll do is I'll find let's say an old horror film on YouTube or something like that, and I'll watch that while I'm on the treadmill. It might take me a couple of days on the treadmill to finish up, depending on how long it is. But oftentimes I'll do something like that, so I can kind of kill two birds at one stone with one stone.
I'm the same way. I usually watch things, or kind of watch things, I guess would be more appropriate, while I'm exercising. So I'm
Hmm.
focusing primarily on the exercises, and sometimes I can watch something for seconds, or if auditorily something seems to be going on that I'd like to watch. Other than that, I'm just listening to it and doing what I'm doing, and they're happening simultaneously.
The some of the other movies that I have been watching at home. Just the other night, we watched a Lucio Fulci movie, and I like him as a director, although there's a lot of gratuitous violence in his films. Called City of the Living Dead, which has a pretty good reputation. It's a movie that he starred Christopher George in. And Christopher George was an actor for a number of years. If you were ever a Rat Patrol fan, I think that's where he got his big break. Um, he had done some episodic television and things before that. And then in the late 60s, he moved into B movies and some better roles on TV. By the time City of the Living Dead was made in 1980, Christopher George was probably, I want to say, close to 50 years old. And still a viable actor, still a big enough name to star in a B horror film. From what I understand, however, Christopher George and Lucio Fulci did not get along very well. And I don't think it was a language barrier. I just don't think that either one of them had any idea of what the other wanted in the film. But Christopher George, his performance in it's not that it's bad, it's just odd.
Hmm.
There is a body count in this thing like crazy, and he is smiling and puffing on a cigar the whole time, almost like it's a cocktail party or something. Now he's a decent actor, but his character's responses to things just don't quite mesh with the film. And I don't know whose fault that was. I don't know if he was just more or less saying, fuck you, Lucio, or what. But it was it's just kind of an odd performance. It's not a bad performance. It's just an odd one. The movie was shot sort of here, there, and everywhere too. There are scenes that were shot in Italy. There are scenes that were shot in Savannah, Georgia, and there are scenes that were shot in New York. It fits together better than it sounds like it might.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the scenes in Savannah, I think, are mostly of the cemetery. If I recall correctly, I could be wrong about that. But it's just odd to have that many different locations of film come together, unless you're doing a Bond film or a travelogue or something like that. But it goes together pretty well, and it is horrific, but a lot of the horror is kind of like what you see today, and that there's no real motivation for it, and a lot of it's just disgust for disgust's sake. There's a scene with maggots in Crypt of the Living Dead that is, ugh. I mean, it's effective. I mean, it kind of gets to you, to watch it, but it's almost excruciating to watch, and it's slow. uh,
You use mealworms instead of maggots because usually in those movies they use mealworms instead of maggots.
well, they are mealworms, but they're supposed to be maggots.
Okay.
But it's gross. And for that, if you are looking for like a gross out horror film, the Italians are good at it for one thing, and City of the Living Dead is one you should really check out. It's a fun movie in that you're never bored in it. Um, you might be scratching your head over a few things, but you're not going to be bored with it. And there's some scenes that really got to me, and that makes an effective horror film. It
Did I
really does. If you're watching something, like this, that's an effective horror film.
we've watched zombie films. We're not as enamored of them as we once were.
Same here. Yeah.
But when we had our store in Pennsylvania and we were closing, we were contemplating like what's the coolest thing we could possibly do in closing our store. So we had a zombie holocaust, and we invited people to dress up, and we give away a lot of our merchandise. We still wound up with a lot of it that we still have in the basement in boxes, but we were selling things inexpensively and giving away prizes. So the whole area, the shopping center area, was flooded with people in zombie makeup doing zombie things for days. It was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced, and I'm glad that we did it. I wish we'd filmed it.
Yeah, really. Well, speaking of which, Zombie Fest in Pittsburgh was Sunday, just a few days ago on the 13th. And I wanted to go but I was kind of exhausted from last week, uh, and did not get to go. But I had a good time last week, but by the time Sunday rolled around, I was just hitting the wall and couldn't do it. But I wanted to though. I did get to see Stevie Wonder last Tuesday, which was a lot of
Oh,
fun.
very cool.
Yeah, one of the last Motown stars who's still out on the road, and if you've I know it sounds ageist to say this, but I've seen a few concerts here and there by people who are just past their prime, people who have just they've lost their voice, or they can't play instruments like they used to. You can't say that about Stevie Wonder. He's 74 years old. He sounds
Sounds
amazing. And he wasn't just sitting there singing. I mean, he had a synthesizer, he had a piano, and he had his harmonica, and he didn't blow a note. I mean, he got
very cool.
everything. He sounded fantastic. I was so impressed. And that was the first. We were the first city on the tour. Pittsburgh was, and that's when you were working out bugs. The first couple of performances, and he blew all three of us away. He was just amazing. Played most of the songs that I wanted to hear, which was not all of them, but most of them, and played a long time. And had I don't know how many people he had up on stage with him. He had horns, he had percussionists, he had 5 backup singers. I mean, he had a big payroll there. And it sounded he sounded fantastic. It was fantastic. He looks good. He still gets around pretty well, and he has not lost his voice. Hasn't lost one thing in like 50, 60 years. I mean, he sounds amazing.
That's inspiring and motivating. I can tell you definitively that I'm not in the same energy category as Stevie Wonder.
Well, neither am I, and he's like 15 years older than I am. I was amazed. I mean, he went strong, for like I said, 2+ hours. There was an intermission there, but it wasn't very long. And he sounded fantastic. And wow, I mean, I always knew he was talented, but I didn't know he was that talented. I mean, he was just spectacular. And a good entertainer too. He's good with the audience. He knows how to talk to the audience and get a response from them. He knows how to get people involved in the music and get them to singing the music along with him. He was amazing.
I'm glad you got a chance to see him, and I'm glad that he's still out and about and doing concerts.
And he hasn't lost one thing to age. I mean, he's just incredible. I was so. It's not that I had expectations for the conference for the concert. Oh my goodness! But they were exceeded. I mean, he was just amazing. Kind of speechless about it, really. It definitely was. Well, I would say one of the best concerts I've been to, in the last 59 years. It was that good.
Wow.
Yeah. Now getting out of there, oh my God, that was a nightmare. we won't talk about what it's like to get away from the PPG arena. Uh, but yeah, I mean, just an amazing concert. I know that doesn't have anything to do with horror films, but
It's still important to know.
oh, what made it a lot of fun. But going back to horror films, I'm a big fan of Mario Bava, who
Yes.
did so many films like Hercules and the Haunted World. That's a Mario Bava film. And his successor, who is Dario Argento. I'm a big fan of his work too, both Italian horror film directors. And I went back and watched a couple of their, what I think to be their best films, really. I watched Blood and Black Lace with a friend of ours who had never seen it before. And that stars Ava Bartok and Cameron Mitchell. It's a
Hmm.
stylish horror film, giallo. It can be seen as a horror film. It might be a giallo at the same time. I really like the film because of the way it is lit. It is brilliantly made and kind of inexpensively made too. But it's not to give away too much of the plot, but it's about a modeling house in Europe, a very successful one. Uh, and one by one, the models start perishing.
Of course they do.
And there's a really, for a 60-year-old movie, there's a really interesting subplot about cocaine and how several of the main characters in the movie are cocaine addicts.
Mm.
Yeah, and imagine in a house of models. But really great film. Ava Bartok's last film, if I'm not mistaken. And she's fantastic, and she looks gorgeous. Cameron Mitchell doesn't have a whole lot to do in it, and I think it was kind of weird to hire. Oftentimes Italian directors and producers would hire an American name, um, you know, more than something just to put on the poster. I mean, they'd hire an American name to get people to come in, and Karen Mitchell doesn't have a whole lot to do in the movie. It's more Ava Bartok than anything else. Of course, she had some star power of her own, but just a beautifully lit film. There's a lot of shots at night, and some of the shots outside must have been hard to orchestrate into the light. You've got to really pump in a lot of light for a nighttime shot to be able to see anything. And what's interesting is that he doesn't use, like a white light that's filtered or anything like that. He'll use like a bright blue or a red light or green or something
Mhm.
like that to light a scene, and it's really effective. It works really well. Not only that, I mean, it just looks it looks fantastic on screen. And it does set the mood for the movie too. Whenever you see a certain color light, you kind of know that ooh, something's going to happen to this person. I love the Blood and Black Lace. I think it's just brilliantly made, wonderfully shot. The cinematography is just second to none. I love some of the camera angles that they use in it to sort of heighten the effect of horror. Just a spectacular movie. So well made too. I also watched with a friend of ours who had seen the movies before. We watched Suspiria, which is my favorite Dario Argento.
It's been years since I've seen Suspiria.
Well, I'm a fan of Dario Argento's, but I'm also a Joan Bennett fan from Dark Shadows, and I've seen a lot of Joan Bennett's movies from the 30s on. And she did a lot of great film noir. She even did a lot of cheap film noir after her career kind of crashed and burned, like Highway Dragnet, which is a cheap AIP movie, but a lot of fun, and she's good in it. I thought she was good in Dark Shadows too. She flubbed her lines from time to time, but
All day.
that's okay. She had a lot of lines to remember. And in soap operas, they don't necessarily write every word out of your line. You have to know your character well enough and to know what plot points are going on at that particular time at filming so that you can just kind of make it up.
Mm-hmm.
The trying to turn out 5 days a week of a television show you've got to have a lot of improv. And sometimes, if your co-star kind of takes an odd route, it might take you a minute or two to gain your footing and being able to return, a few lines. But Joan Bennett, from what I've read about her, she loved being a movie star, and not that she didn't work on her craft or anything like that, but what she loved most about acting was afterward.
Ah,
you know, uh, where you just sort of enjoy the production. And I watched an interview with Jessica Harper, who is the main character in Suspiria, who portrays the main character in Suspiria, that is. And she said that Joan Bennett was pretty much everything she wanted her to be. She said she was just a movie star. And not that she demanded to be treated as such. She said she just acted like
huh. It's a
one.
very
And
thing to think about. Try to
oh,
process.
I love it. And there again, that's another vestige of old Hollywood that's long gone. And Joan Bennett, I think she appreciated what she had by the time Dark Shadows rolled around, and kind of revived her career. She was married to Walter Wanger, who was a big producer in 40s and 50s movies. Very, very powerful, successful producer. Well, he suspected that she was having an affair with her agent, so he shot her agent.
Ooh.
And in a particular location, if that makes any sense. Um, so I mean that and that scandal. I mean, I don't know if Joan Bennett was messing around with her agent or not. I mean, her husband could have just paranoid, and she might have been doing it. Who knows? Um, but it ruined her career. It just torpedoed it at a really bad time, because she was in her early 40s, and that's a rough time for was a
Right.
rough time for actresses. Um, and I mean, she had kept her career going, and then for all of a sudden, that just took it out of contention for a few years, and just kind of killed it for her. And she worked her way back in B movies and such. But by the time Dark Shadows rolled around and she got the role, that TV show, especially after Barnabas or Jonathan Frid was cast as Barnabas Collins, and the show got really popular, she became famous again. And late in life, I think she really appreciated it too, because she knew what she had that she had lost. And I think it was wonderful that she got to bask in it again, and maybe more than ever, because to be a star when you're 30, I guess, is one thing, but to be well known when you're 60 is quite enough.
Something else, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and,
I was
and
also
but
in
because
Dark Shadows, and Athena was one of the Collinsport players. They used to do the skits at the conventions with the stars, and so she has a lot more experiences than I do in that universe.
I love the Colin Sport players. That's that is perfect. That is a perfect name. I love it. Anyway, I wanted to. I've been trying to watch a horror movie a day. I've missed a couple of days, unfortunately, but I've been trying to watch something every day to get into the mood for the season, and it's rapidly approaching. And as a matter of fact, your anniversary is rapidly approaching.
Yes, it is Halloween. We got married on Halloween, and this will be our 21st anniversary. So I'm looking
And
forward to it.
and to my way of thinking, that's 2 weeks from today, I believe.
I believe so. Yes, it's very close. I've been
Well,
trying to
I
watch horror movies too, but from like a slightly different angle. I'm interested in mythology and folklore. And
mhm.
a lot of horror movies that are supposedly based on true stories have become our folklore for the day, and people get their information about them through the movies primarily. And the truth upon which they're based is actually quite flimsy, and the stories did not unfold as they do on the screen. But the screen stories are remembered and become part of the folklore, and so the legend lives on. So since that's been a lifelong preoccupation with me, I've been looking at horror movies from that angle recently. Like, how do they
Hmm.
contribute to the paranormal lore? How did they give birth to the paranormal movement? How much of it is actually true, and how much of it is based on storytelling? So there are no hard or fast answers, but I find the topic phenomenally fascinating. So I've been focusing on that a great deal. So I'm watching most recently the Conjuring stories, The Conjuring 1, 2, 3, Annabelle, The Nun, The Legend of La Llorona, or The Curse of La Llorona, and some of the other ones that the Warrens were in, like the Amityville Horror and A Haunting in Connecticut. And all these are entertainments, but they contain a lot of information that's based on writings that may or may not be true. And they become part of the knowledge that people share about the paranormal and living folklore, basically. So I'm like really enthused about that study that I'm conducting.
Well, one last film that
Sure.
an older one that I've taken in rather recently is the 1958 horror sci-fi film called Fiend Without a Face.
Mm,
It's one of my favorite B movies from the 1950s in terms of horror and sci-fi because it really is scary and creepy. In a lot of 50s horror films, when you get to see the monster, it's almost laughable. Like it conquered the world, which is today's B movie of the day at the drive-in, as a matter of fact. Uh, uh, I love It Conquered the World because it has three fantastic actors in it. But Beverly Garland, whose birthday it is today, Peter Graves, and Lee Van Cleef. Um, and it's a fun movie, but the monster, it looks like an artichoke. I mean, it just it does not. There's nothing scary about it. It's actually hilarious looking. The beings in Fiend Without a Face are sort of brains with stems, and they're kind of creepy. And the sound effects in Fiend Without a Face, which stars Marshall Thompson. Did you ever watch Doctari when you were a kid?
oh, of course, yes.
Okay, he's Doctari. He was in Clarence the Cross-Eyed Lion too. Did a lot of B movies in the 40s and 50s. Gallant Bass. He's in The Cult of the Cobra, which is a fun movie that I saw not too long ago. It's a horror film. But Fiend Without a Face, I think if you want a genuinely scary B movie from the 50s, check it out. It's a lot of fun. It's well acted, and it is genuinely creepy. I do recommend turning the sound up on it because that the sound is part of it. It's part of the terror or the fear of the movie, and just a lot of fun to watch. I actually watched it on Svengoolie
Ah,
when it
okay.
aired. I think it was last Saturday, as a matter of
Sounds incredibly awesome. And there are so many movies that we'll never run out of things to talk about.
fact. True.
So, one quick question, and then we'll share contact information. When did you know that movies were your destiny or your passion or uh, your path?
I don't know that I knew it, um, but this started when I was a child. I,
Mm,
well, I would say like 5, 6, when I started watching movies in earnest. And when I was able to start remembering what I had seen. Uh, but my parents took me to the movies a lot as a kid. And you'll remember that back in the day, if you were lucky, you had three television stations or three television channels
right, I remember that.
to watch. And then beyond that, if you wanted to see something different, um, you had to go to the theater, whether that was a drive-in or your local theater downtown. And you win a lot. Well, we win a lot to the movies at least once, twice a week. I would say
Yes.
it was phenomenally cheap to go for one thing. If you went, especially if you went to the drive-in on dollar night, which I think it was Tuesday nights were dollar nights.
I
So
lived,
how many ever people you had in the car, it didn't matter. It was just $1. You came in.
yeah, I lived in the city, so we didn't have drive-ins in the city, but we had three local theaters within walking distance, and they were
Hmm.
be cheap. So I used to get to the movies a couple of times a week as well.
Even when I was in high school, we had a grindhouse theater downtown, and like on Saturday nights that they would run old films, not well, older films, not new ones. But you could see like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which had was several years old at that point. I saw Halloween there once, which was a couple of years old even then. I saw a Hard Day's Night there, and it was usually $1 to get in,
Yeah.
or $1.25 or $1.50, something like that, which was cheap even then. But it was also filthy, and your feet stuck to the floor.
That's true, but it was cheap and
But it was cheap. And they didn't. If it was winter, they didn't bother with the heat. You just you stood there or sat there, bundled up, and the seats were like original to the theater, and oh god, they were awful. But it
so
was cheap.
the popcorn people of today are carrying on an ancient tradition. It's It seems. The theaters with the popcorn that you were talking about,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
it's a tribute to the movie houses in our neighborhoods we grew up with.
I guess so. But dang, I mean, hire somebody with a broom and a dustpan. Now the sticky floors were from, I guess, from probably pop or but Coke, whatever, just spilling on the back in the day, and just never being cleaned. But today, I mean, it's a mess. And like I said, I hate the smell of that popcorn anyway. Ugh,
Hmm.
mm, just don't care for it.
So how can people find you and enter the world of Brian's Drive-In Theater?
Well, you can always visit Brian's Drive-In Theater at briansdrivein There's a movie of the day every day. Unfortunately, the Internet Archive was hacked last week, and they don't have their site back together yet. So for the meanwhile, I've been using YouTube, as a source of movies for the movie of the day. I'm hoping that the Internet Archive comes back, but for right now, it's not good. You can also interact with me on social media by using Facebook and run a search for Brian Walker or Brian's Drive-In Theater, and I should turn up.
And he does turn up if you look in those places and many other places besides. And Brian, I want to thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Always good
Thank
seeing you. Give my regards to Greg,
I
and
will.
I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay, take care, Hercules.
Okay, be well. And thanks to our audience for tuning in. This will be up tomorrow, which is Friday, sometime before noon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good night.